Morning, everyone, and welcome to our second Coffees with Conversations event of 2021. Today's session is all about blockchain and cryptocurrency, and I am very privileged to be on this call with Hugo Feiler, Will Fulks, and Jeff Hancock. We'll get to who we've got on the panel in a minute, but firstly, I'd just like to welcome everyone. I hope you're sat somewhere comfortable with a nice cup of coffee, ready for the conversation that we are going to have this morning. Our plan for today is to spend about half an hour, 40 minutes, just discussing all things blockchain and cryptocurrency, and then have about 20 minutes at the end where we can answer any questions. So if you have any questions as we're going through, please do feel free to put them into the chat. I believe there should be a chat box on there for you to enter your questions, and we will have a look at those in the last 20 minutes. I'm quite excited about today. There's a lot of content that we need to cover, and I'm very privileged to be in the seat where I get to ask the questions. I almost feel like I'm the electric fence and these guys are the dinosaurs. We're all on Isla Nublar and Mother Nature's about to find her way in, but I'll do my best to try and control the raptors. In terms of housekeeping, this is all virtual. We're all in our virtual offices, as are you, I presume. So if you hear a fire alarm, do get yourself to safety. As much as I'm sure you'd love to hear what we have to say, it is being recorded. You can hear it and play it back afterwards, so you won't miss anything. Just make sure that you are safe. And it's something I am required to say that, unfortunately, to my belief, none of us on this call are financial advisors. So anything that we do discuss this morning is not investment advice. All of this is for educational and entertainment purposes. And I should warn you, the entertainment is not guaranteed, but we'll try our best to keep this as entertaining as possible. So that's probably enough from me. It's probably time to introduce our guests. So I will go round in turn and just ask the people that we have with us today to introduce themselves, what they do, and how they got into this whole area of technology. So Hugo, you happy to go first?
Yes. Thanks very much, Ben, and hi, everyone. So my name is Hugo Feiler, and I'm the co-founder and CEO at Minima. Minima is a new base layer blockchain protocol that runs in full on mobile phones. That means that via a simple app download, everyone using Minima can run the network as an equal. I think we'll talk about lots of in the future, in the rest of this conversation. We'll probably talk about the blockchain removing middlemen, and yet in the current infrastructure of blockchain, there are lots of middlemen still there, like the miners and the block producers, the snark workers, the validators. Whereas with Minima, via a simple app download, everyone runs the chain in an equal way. So there are no middlemen. So we're taking out that, which makes us the most decentralized blockchain protocol in existence. And we have been in build since the end of 2018, and we'll be going live at the end of this year. And we have been working hard in the background to do that, and we will soon be releasing our APK for people to download and to play around with. My background is actually not techie. My co-founder is the tech genius behind Minima. My background is 20 years in marketing communications, having run and founded global advertising agencies, working with the likes of Vodafone, Toshiba, and Sony. And I sort of got into blockchain probably back in sort of 2016, and have been sort of fascinated ever since. So that's me.
Fantastic, thanks, Hugo. We'll go around clockwise. Jeff, you're next.
Thanks, Ben. So my name is Jeff Hancock. I'm co-founder, CEO of CoinPass.com. We are a UK-based cryptocurrency trading and investment exchange. We bridge the gap between UK banks and cryptocurrency. We're able to sign up accounts in a few minutes, deposit funds and trade within a few seconds. We started out in 2018, middle of the bear market, when everyone thought we were crazy bringing a UK cryptocurrency exchange to market. But here we are, in 2021. It is 2021. I have to keep looking at the date because we've been indoors for so long now. I forget the date. Q3, right? Wow. And my background is in engineering. So while I carry out as CEO and sales and marketing duties, my background is in tech and infrastructure. I did about 6.5 years in casinos back in Australia. Vegas-sized casinos, the big ones. Came to the UK, the data centers, worked up to doing food brands such as Ella's Kitchen, Goo Desserts, Goo Puddings, a couple of accountancy firms in Wimbledon. Up until working with the hedge fund called SoftBank, the Vision Fund, as everyone might be aware of. And during 2018, I was involved in property. I was involved in a bit of tech consultancy, contracting at SoftBank, and just got hit with the entrepreneur bug when a couple of my now co-founders came to me and said, we want to buy, a relatively large position in Bitcoin in pounds without any FX exposure. How do we do that? And in 2018, there were pretty much no real professional high grade exchanges in the UK you could do that with. You had Coinbase, which was still in US dollars, and you had a few others which were offering euros, but no real GBP liquidity. So we wanted to make it fast, easy, scalable, and available to everyone to really kind of, get that financial digital inclusion to everyone in the UK space. And it's been going really well since then.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jeff. And last but by no means least, Will.
Hello everyone. So my name's Will Folks. I am one of the very few blockchain lawyers at the moment in the world, I think. So that's really all I do now. My background is in finance, corporate finance, and I've worked in the city for quite a long time, and also in France, where I got bitten by the blockchain bug, and I've really, since 2016, it's all I wanted to do. So I guess my mission is to educate, almost evangelize the benefits of blockchain to businesses, kind of anyone who'll sit still long enough to listen to me talk about it. And yeah, basically help clients with legal compliance, which is still quite, it's still, regulators aren't quite there yet in most jurisdictions, and it's quite tricky. So yeah, I basically try and help my clients understand the evolving regulatory landscape. And also we've just formed at Stevenson McCaw Consulting, which is our consulting arm that actually helps businesses design everything from their own token, their own cryptocurrency, their own NFT, if you're into that at the moment, all the way through to then actually building it if they want. So kind of the whole legal, but also strategic, commercial and technological piece now. So very much full service, which is quite exciting. So that's me.
Fantastic. Thanks, Will. I will say a bit about me very quickly. I'm a director at Francis Clark. I head up our blockchain and cryptocurrency offering. I'm an accountant and a tax advisor by trade, which makes me the least exciting person on the call today, which is great because I'm the person asking.
Don't say that, Ben. You're very exciting.
That's kind of you. I mean, let's just get stuck in. Well, I'm going to turn to you for the first couple of questions because you're a man of many analogies. So what is blockchain? Well,
gosh, what a question. I'm so glad you asked me that to start things off. Yeah, it's good to kind of level the playing field. So very quickly, I did have some slides, but I'll go a cappella. So it's a 12,000-year-old problem, and blockchain is the latest iteration of the solution. And that problem is around trust. So if you look back to the dawn of agricultural society and the issues that any farmer or landowner had when he tried to plow a field, was it was limited to how much he could plow on his own with his own oxen and with his own plow. If you wanted to borrow a plow from a neighbor, or even borrow an oxen so that he could plow twice the size of the field and get more grain, so that he could expand his holding, he would need to enter into some kind of an agreement with his neighbor to lend him that plow. And that agreement usually went around the likes of, okay, well, if you lend me your plow or your ox, I'll give you some of that harvest at the end of the harvest. And the problem was, before writing and before any way to record that agreement, there was often dispute at the end of the harvest saying, well, you said 3 bushels. No, you didn't. You said 2 bushels. And so there was an issue with trust, and you might be able to overcome that once, but ultimately you probably wouldn't work together again unless there was some way to resolve that. And so the first iteration of contracts were these things called clay bollers that were clay balls. And within those, you would have, if you imagine a hollow ball with these physical balls inside that would then replicate how many bushels of grain were agreed upon, and at the end of the harvest you'd crack that ball open and see how many balls are there, and that would represent that would conclusively show how many they'd agreed at the beginning of the harvest. That wasn't ideal, and the next iteration of that was, because you couldn't see halfway through the harvest, you'd have to crack it open so you couldn't see how many balls inside, so people started scratching on the outside how many balls were inside, and that led to the dawn of writing, and the first contract was written on one of these things called a clay boller. Dawn of lawyers as well, which is great. I'm sure there were some people out to help them with their scratching. So that was the initial, and since then, obviously, we've progressed to more formalized written contracts and agreements, and yeah, you've got intermediaries. But we've never solved this problem, really, of overcoming the lack of trust between any two people without a trusted intermediary that sits in the middle. And that applies to almost all of our transactions. Think how many people in your life you would trust with your bank PIN number. Or the kind of things that, or your money. It's a very small circle. You might trust your lawyer, but you have to pay your lawyer to intervene on your behalf and to bridge that trust gap. In a global commerce situation, it's eBay, PayPal, Amazon. You've got these intermediaries that sit between you and whoever's in this other country that you've never met in order to bridge the trust gap and allow you to facilitate a transaction. What blockchain does is it effectively eliminates the need to have trusted intermediaries that Hugo touched upon earlier. So to give you a concrete example of what blockchain is, I'm going to tell you another very quick story, if that's okay. Because when often people describe it as something like a spreadsheet in the cloud, or which I find not that great, you can't really get your hands on that kind of description. Actually, what it was based upon and where blockchain came from was the financial crash. So if you cast your mind back to 2008, 2009 with the credit crunch and this lack of trust in our financial institutions, that was really when these group of people called the cyberpunks came along and said, okay, we need to create a digital currency that doesn't rely on centralized intermediaries to facilitate transactions. But to do that, they had to overcome something called the double spend problem, which is quite simply, if I have a £10 note in my hand, imagine for a second the world is normal and we're all sat in a room together. I can give that £10 note to Ben, and he then, no doubt, he has that £10 note. I can't give that simultaneously to Hugo. In the world of digital, we rely on our banks to update my ledger and update Ben's ledger in a way that means I can't spend my digital £10 twice. So we still trust HSBC, Lloyds, Monzo, whoever, to facilitate that transaction. If you get rid of them, how do you make sure that I don't give £10 to Ben, Hugo, or Jeff at the same time? The double spending, because if you do that, the currency is valueless. No one will trust it. No one will use it. And so the way that they overcame that double spend issue was by looking at the example of the island of Yap in the middle of the Pacific Ocean 400 years ago. And their monetary system was based on something called rye stones. And the rye stones, so the story goes, a group of men got in a canoe and paddled off to an island that was quite far away. And on that island, they found these beautiful green stones that they called rye stones that didn't exist on their home island of Yap. And they hacked off big lumps of it, put them in their canoe, paddled them all the way back to their home island. And there they were made into jewelry, and more crucially, these big things called rye stones. If you imagine a large donut-shaped disc, hole in the middle, donut-shaped, they were called rye stones, and the chief of the village would have a huge rye stone outside of his house to show what a big deal he was. But to spend that, they weren't very portable. You wouldn't wheel it around and give it to someone for your groceries, or if you wanted to buy a house or something. So the way they would spend it is they would gather all the villagers around and say, okay, is everyone listening? I'm going to give, chief of the village talking, yes, everyone listening, I'm going to give a third of my rye stone to Greg in exchange for his house. Has everyone got that? Is everyone recording that in their memories? And everyone say, yes, yes, we understand that you're giving a third of that to Greg in exchange for his house. So that the next day, if one or two of them said, you didn't give it to Greg, you gave it to us for something else, then everyone else would say, you weren't listening, or you're lying, you gave it to Greg. Does that make sense? Can't hear you respond, but I think that makes sense.
Just to me.
And so equally, if 4 or 5 of them died, or they were hacked, so they got together and decided in collaboration with a third party they would lie, provided you had 20 or more, 50% or more of the network of those villagers agreeing and consenting, so you have this consensus, then the transaction would be valid and could be added to their memories forever. And if you imagine that all those villagers would know exactly who owned what on the island, they'd have a complete record in their memory of all the transactions, then that's basically how blockchain works. And the exciting thing about that is it removes this need to trust any single one of those villagers. An alternative way they could have done it would be to appoint a village elder to be the guardian of all transactions. So if you wanted to go and buy something, you'd go to old village elder and say, okay, I want to now sell my house. Can you remember that? And if anyone disputes it, you remember that that's what it is. But of course, that wouldn't have worked because he could have been bribed. He could have died. He could have forgotten because it's just people's memory. So that solution that they came up with worked really well. And that's basically how blockchain works. It's obviously it's computers, or what are called nodes instead of villages. And in the Bitcoin network, I think there's something like 23,000 nodes. So individual computers that have a complete record of every single Bitcoin transaction since the beginning of time. As we'll come on to, there are a lot of problems with that. The ideology is beautiful and elegant. The reality is quite different. We actually have a concentration of mining pools, and so we don't have that complete distribution. That's basically it. Hopefully that's helpful. The final point I'll say is what's useful about that is that you can trust that data. If you were a Donald Trump or someone who came and wanted to buy the island, you could query those villages and trust that provided 50% of them said the same thing and agreed, you'd know exactly who owned what and who to pay. So you can trust the data provided you've got consensus. That's it from me.
So almost
sense.
In that analogy where you've got that consensus and you need more than half the people, you could almost equivalent hackers to sort of those social media influencers or fake news trying to, affect public perception of what's actually happened, and that's what it would take to effectively change data within that blockchain.
Yeah. So you need as many villages as possible to, the more you get, you incrementally reduce your risk of that happening. So the goal is to get as large a distribution as possible. And that's hopefully where we'll get Minima to talk about, or Hugo to talk about that in Minima, because that's the real step change with what he's doing.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, is it worth sort of, you've touched there on the consensus algorithms. I wonder whether it's worth actually exploring, the proof of work, proof of stake mechanisms here. Hugo, is that something you're happy to sort of?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, let's take Bitcoin as the initial example, because Bitcoin uses proof of work. So basically, in order to validate the transactions, you have to do some work, in order for the miners to find the next block and the next Bitcoin, you have to do work to do that. You have to do processing power to do that. And the really interesting thing about that is that you're actually putting something of intrinsic value, so energy, into that. So it has intrinsic value. And that was something that means that you can't cheat the system, because you have to do that work in order to do that. Unlike, and we go back to the analogy before the double spend problem came along, which was, if you send an email online, I could send an email to Will and say, I'm going to give you £5, but I could also then copy and paste that email and send it to Ben, or to send it to Jeff, and they could then do the same. So that doesn't create the value. Whereas and what it means is, if I want to do that over and over again, I could do that without any cost. Whereas if you are having to use processing power on your computers to find the next Bitcoin, then that is something that they can't be cheated. And so that is where the proof of work that backs up the consensus comes in, and it means that you can't cheat the system. That obviously, as people know, and I'm sure everyone's reading the headlines about how much energy is being used there, then led to a different solution, which we take to proof of stake, where their concept was, actually, we'll have people, and the people who are going to make the decisions on what is correct within the chain, the more stake you hold in the chain itself, the more power you have to make the decisions, basically. So if you have a huge stake, then you have more voting power, basically. And the premise of that is that people will stay good actors, because if they cheat the system, and if they have a big vote because they have lots of stake in the system, and they cheat it, then actually they will lose that stake themselves. So the theory goes that the more you have to lose, the better actor you will be. And so that's the way that the proof of stake works, but it doesn't use energy to do that. It just uses the collective voting power that you have on the system, because you have a bigger stake in the system. Now, obviously, the challenge with that, though, is that it doesn't mitigate against the idea that potentially you might accumulate a huge amount of stake in order to destroy the system. Only based on the fact that it's that you're being motivated by financial gain. So if you lose the money, then you're financially worse off. So as long as you are financially incentivized to make those decisions, and that's why you make those decisions, then that is fine. However, if you are looking to actually just destroy the network because you're a bad actor, because you are a rogue state or a terrorist, then actually you might decide to make those decisions and lose the money, because actually the money isn't the important thing. It's actually taking control of the network that's more important. So whereas with proof of work, it's much more difficult because you have to do the processing power for that, basically. So there's two different ways that sort of almost control the validators within the network. And the way that Minima works is that we do use processing power, but we do a very small amount of processing power that gets added together by each user doing a little bit of work on their phone. And there's no financial incentive. There's no financial incentive paid. And we just use the reason why we use the network is because we gain benefit from the utility on the network itself. So it takes away the financial incentive. So it means that if you are a financial actor, you'll obviously carry on doing the right thing. But also, if you're a non-financial actor, you'll also not be able to cheat the system from that, because obviously, as Will said, the whole benefit of going from a centralized system, which actually is very efficient, the banks and the PayPals of this world is a very efficient system. A database is always more efficient than blockchain. But if you want to go to blockchain, then you have to have a system that cannot be cheated, and that is what blockchain has been created for. And there are lots of different ways that this is being approached, whether it's proof of work or proof of stake. We believe that proof of work is important by doing a little bit of work, but we also believe that having a financial incentive to make sure that people aren't cheating the system isn't enough. It needs to be something where you literally cannot cheat the system, regardless of whether or not you want to try and do that. And that's how we do that, by everyone being an equal on the system, basically.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Hugo. I mean, we've sort of, we've talked there about how blockchain is effectively providing that element of trust, and in the same time, we're actually talking about how that process is already evolving and improving to, ensure that that trust is maintained through effectively how blockchains are evolving. And we've got quite quickly there into sort of, a lot of sort of the tech side of how it's evolving. I mean, what are some sort of real world examples here of how blockchain can help businesses, individuals with that trust mechanism? I'm going to put that to the group. Anyone who'd like to.
There's a really good example of JP Morgan's version of Ethereum that they basically, the one thing with crypto and the one thing with blockchain is most of them are open source, so you can take a copy of it and make it your own. That's why you see so many versions of Bitcoin out there that have kind of put their own little spin on it. And one specific use case, and forgive me, we'll probably find the article later, put it in there. It was either Brazil or another Latin American country used the Quorum network and basically put all of their governmental back office onto that chain to increase efficiency in terms of their data processing. So you've got the economics office and financial crime, your trade bodies, all of those kind of governmental departments now using the same data sets in real time, instead of using a centralized cloud system, instead of relying on email or paper filing. And it's cut all of the essential loss and waste of time and inefficient data between different government departments by using a blockchain-based backend. And that's just one of the real-world examples of using it in a non-monetary way to connect different parts of government together to have extreme efficiency. And the Estonian government have done it as well with their e-residency programs and other various departments being powered by some sort of blockchain backend.
I got a couple.
I'm sure you do.
I'll go two different ones very quickly. One is financial inclusion and one is carbon tracing. So financial inclusion, I'll give you an example around the NFT craze of late. So NFT stands for non-fungible token, and it's using blockchain to create digital uniqueness. So one of the properties we didn't talk about is that once something is saved onto the blockchain, it is there forever. This concept of something called immutability. So you can't go back and say that something is, you didn't say what you said, or you didn't do what you said you do, or something like that. If you've done it, it's there forever for everyone to see. And another thing is that you can create unique tokens that are there for everyone to see, and unique digital, and applied to art, you then can create unique pieces of digital art. You've probably read about this in the press with some people making a lot of money from that. But the more interesting story is often around these smaller artists that have been sort of building a presence over the last 3 years or so in this space, and starting to sell their own creations from countries that are either subject to restrictions or are basically difficult for, they're usually developing countries, and there are stories of people totally changing their family situation, their income and lifestyle around the fact that they are now able to sell these things online and basically make a lot more money than they were able to make before. And another example of that is around digital currencies, and the fact now that digital currencies can transcend borders. And you can, there's an example of Bangladeshi blanket weavers who, prior to cryptocurrencies, were unable to sell things online because of either currency fluctuation or non-acceptance of Bangladeshi currency. But now through crypto, we're able to start listing their blankets that they would weave online and sell. If they were able to sell one blanket through an online forum, they were able to double their monthly income, which is another example of this basically including more people in the global financial economy, which is super exciting through cryptocurrencies and things like NFTs. The other one I'd briefly touch upon is new things around it's actually another project that I'm involved with around carbon tracing and creating carbon tokens that can track carbon capture and link that to specific trees that are geolocated. So you can buy a carbon token and then actually see which tree that is tied to, and you can algorithmically map the carbon capture over the life cycle of that tree to that token. So that token will appreciate in value, can be traded on a secondary market, people who want to offset their carbon, or be, and again, all of that is stored immutably in a trusted way, and it's transparent on the blockchain. So those are two quick ones.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. I mean, we've sort of, the elements we've talked about there is sort of efficiency, prosperity, cost reducing, lots of benefits to this technology. I think maybe because we're sort of touching on things, maybe we need to discuss how cryptocurrency sort of exists. We've got blockchain, we've got cryptocurrency, and maybe it's worth sort of just touching on that a little bit, I think, for sort of viewers in terms of, well, what, Bitcoin is a blockchain, but we've got other cryptocurrencies as well. What, perhaps it's worth us just expanding a little bit on that before we get into some more of sort of the cryptocurrency aspect. Will, you happy to
keep going? Yeah, if people are happy to keep listening to me. So what are the differences between cryptocurrencies and blockchain? So if you think about, a good analogy is maybe like blockchain is like the internet. So some people are calling it the third generation of the internet, or the internet of value, whereas we have the internet of information at the moment. So it's extremely easy, as Hugo said earlier, to share information. You can email, you can Wikipedia page things. That's very easy, but transferring anything of value is extremely difficult. And what blockchain does is, again, it's a step change in the way that we are able to interact with people that we don't know and transact things of value. So if you think of blockchain as like the new internet in a way, then these cryptocurrencies are a bit like internet startups. So we've seen there's something called the Gartner hype curve that you may be aware of, which applies to new technology. And it has 5 stages. So if you Google Gartner hype curve, again, sorry, I can't put it up on screen, but you have technology inception, which starts at the bottom. And then you get this big, like a bell curve, hype curve, where it goes up and everyone gets very, very excited about this new technology. And then it peaks. So the peak of inflated expectations is what they call it. And this happens with any new technology, when everyone thinks, oh my God, actually, this is going to be an awful lot of work to get this to work. It's a great idea, but gosh, it's going to be hard. And then it drops down to something called the trough of disillusionment. And it generally takes, depending on the technology, 5, 10, 20 years for it to come out of that trough of disillusionment into something called the plateau of productivity, where the actual technology can be harnessed and used. And again, we saw that with the internet. There's a great video that I hope we can share of someone being explained how email works in 1984 and what is required to use that. And it's a very dedicated server. You have to have basically a dedicated computer. You can do extremely limited things. And you fast forward where we've gone from that in 1984 to Internet 2.0, where we are now, which is streaming media, Facebook, webinars like we're doing now. It's a whole different ball game to what we had in 1984. But it took 20 years, 30 years to get there. What we're seeing now, obviously, is technology evolves a lot faster, but blockchain is still in its early days. And we saw in the end of 2017, 2018, a huge number of scams around something called ICOs, so initial coin offerings, with people thinking, gosh, this is a great way that I can raise finance by issuing 1 billion will tokens and then going out and selling them and seeing if anyone wants to buy them. And lo and behold, if I was an interesting enough proposition, or my team was interesting, or we had a good marketing team, people would buy them thinking that it's the next big thing. Again, we're seeing a lot of this now with the NFT market. And a lot of people lost their money, and there were scams, there were pyramid schemes, Ponzi schemes. If you haven't heard the Missing Crypto Queen BBC podcast series, I recommend that. Although caveat, there was never a cryptocurrency, it was purely a scam. But yeah, so we had a lot of people lose their money, and that can be likened to the dot-com bubble bursting. So a lot of internet startups saying, oh my God, yeah, I'm going to jump on this bandwagon, create this next best thing, it's going to be amazing. And of course, then people lost their money, and then, oh, well, actually, no, maybe the internet isn't such a big thing. And again, if you look back to articles in the New York Times, you can see a lot of people saying, is the internet just a fad? Is it going to go away? There's Bill Gates explaining on Letterman what the internet is, and him saying, well, you can record, no, I do the accent, you can record things. And Letterman's like, have you heard of a cassette tape? He's like, yeah, well, you can stream live audio. It's like, have you heard of the radio? Yeah, and you can just see Gates getting more and more angry.
So, Will, can I jump? I mean,
yeah, please do.
Sorry, just to build on that. I mean, I think there are the similarity between the sort of the launch and the rise of cryptocurrencies and the dot-com boom are really good ones, basically. Because I think that I was in advertising back in the sort of end of the 90s, early 2000s, when I had companies coming with huge budgets to promote their brilliant new company that was going to be online, basically, and they were coming with terrible business ideas, but because it had a .com at the end, they thought it was going to succeed, and people were throwing money at them just because it had .com at the end, basically. And obviously a few of them succeeded, but most of them didn't, because they weren't really thought out business plans and business models. They just had .com on the end, and I think that in many ways is the same with the sort of 2017, 2018. Everything got very, very exciting. Everyone sort of piled in there, and was, as long as it was crypto, then it was going to succeed. And obviously that wasn't the case. And I think that in that period since then, the companies that are succeeding have been building slowly but surely out of that, and there are ones that make sense for it to be a cryptocurrency, just as it made sense for a .com at the time, basically. But there are some that didn't, and I think that the thing about blockchain is that it is an extremely inefficient process, but it's very, very secure. And so there are lots of things where actually you might as well just use a SQL database rather than putting it on the blockchain. And I think that it's when value needs to be transmitted online, then that is the time when, and you need and you would normally need trust for that. Then that is when you need a blockchain. But it's actually, if it's just sort of putting something on a blockchain just because it's the in thing, that is not going to succeed, basically. And that is the process that we're in at the moment. And I think that, sorry, to build on one other point you made, Will, about the internet. I mean, I think the other thing to remember is that so you have if you have a cryptocurrency, it sits on some kind of base layer blockchain protocol, and there are hundreds of them at the moment, but not every, you only need one internet. So there's going to be a consolidation over time of saying, well, actually, there's going to be just a few solutions that make sense to people. There are some that, there are too many at the moment, because not everyone can work out which one to be on. And I think that is also the underlying challenge with NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which is the new buzzword. They're all built on different platforms, and there are going to be a few winners, and then everyone is going to be able to sort of know where they stand on those. At the moment, there are so many different ones that you can't really decide which ones are right and which ones are wrong, basically. I think that will be a process that will, over the next few years, sort of create a clarity for people. But at the moment, it's very much a sort of, everyone's trying everything.
Yeah, and to finish up my analogy, I was saying, so yeah, when people, the blockchain skeptics or people who say, oh yeah, all these scams, everything, say yes, but yes, a lot of those startups failed, but we still have the internet, and we still have Amazon, eBay. So exactly that, like there is a process of where they all sort of fall away, and the key people remain. But yeah.
Can I?
No, go for it. You.
Sorry, no, I've just seen a question come up from Suzanne Jeffers on the public chat, because I know how these things work. Unless you answer them now, then they'll just get lost in the plethora. So just looking at the carbon token. So I think that, firstly on that point, Suzanne, the really exciting thing about blockchain is it allows a direct connection between.
Sorry, Hugo, is it worth just saying the question that Suzanne's asked?
Sorry.
Okay,
sorry, everyone's here. Sorry, yeah. So basically, it says, super interesting carbon token. I've spoken to a few creative individuals about the use of blockchain for their products. There seems to be reluctance to get involved because of the risk of the environment and the issues around sustainability. All the computers, nodes, servers would need electricity. Is there anything that can be done to encourage the use of blockchain for these creative individuals and offset caution to reputational risk for using tech that could have negative impact on the environment? Long-winded, but I'd be grateful for your thoughts. So okay, so so a couple of questions there. So a couple of points. Firstly, creativity is a huge opportunity. The opportunity for blockchain to help creativity is fantastic, because firstly, it can connect the creator with the consumer without having to go through the middleman, centralized middleman. So whether that is a platform that takes all of the credit, or a platform that takes all the money, and from that actually you can get direct access between the two. So there's definitely huge benefits for blockchain, but as you say, the methodology of blockchain has potential downsides in terms of the amount of energy that is being used. Now, I can let Will talk about the carbon offset side of things. From my perspective, in terms of minima, what we're doing is we are basically, say, the nodes that create the direct connection between a creator who's running a node on their phone and a consumer that's running a node on the phone. That energy is very, very small. And also, when phones become rechargeable through ambient light, then actually all of that energy and processing power will be coming straight from renewable energy anyway. So there are lots of strides towards that. But if you prefer to stick to the Bitcoin solution, then I'll let Will talk on the carbon offset side of things, because again, there's so much innovation going on in there. It's very, very exciting.
Yeah, I've got to be careful because I can't say too much, but the very high level, the project I'm involved in is using, it's got several stages to it, but at a high level, it's turning volcanoes into trees. So using geothermal volcanic energy to mine crypto, so energy that wouldn't otherwise be used, which is a key starting point. And then using the proceeds of that to plant fast-growing carbon capturing trees, something called a Paulownia tree. And they grow to the size of an oak in 8 years and capture broadly 250 tons of carbon each, which is then sequestered away, and it can then be chopped down and turned into furniture and captured forever. The problem with existing carbon tokenization is basically, as with anything, there's a lot of fraud in carbon tokens, a lot of fraud in tree planting schemes, basically them not actually planting trees. And the idea with, what we've actually built now, and this is through a side venture of mine, to full disclosure, I have a startup as well. So that's what we're working on. And we've now created this carbon token that at the moment we're using something called 3 words, but also can basically geotag where the tree is and track it through its life cycle. So that token can then be used to offset your carbon usage. So if you're a corporate and you can actually calculate how much your carbon usage is, and you can then buy a number of these tokens. When you're doing that, you're planting trees that will capture the equivalent amount of carbon. It's very exciting. It's a lot to do that along with being a lawyer, but fortunately there's a great team working on it. I'm just sometimes just the face, but it's a super exciting project because there is no doubt there are a lot of issues. Well, first of all, obviously with the environment at the moment anyway, but with a technology that is by design designed to consume a lot of energy. It's obviously that's problematic, and so yeah, I think there are a lot of people now that are looking to, so as these large institutional investors get into and in fact, Jeff, you probably can speak to this as well, as what now that there are more and more institutions getting involved, that's certainly something from a PR perspective they need to think about, is do they want to be, and this applies to the NFT space as well, is the environmental impact and what is their, not just the response, I guess CPR strategy, but what is their environmental strategy getting into this space as well. But yeah, Jeff, I imagine you've got something to say about that.
No, I think in that sort of same breath, the environmental impact of Bitcoin, and there's all these stats out there. It uses the same amount of energy as Switzerland or all these countries combined, and that data is very easy to come by now because they can see the hash rate in real time. They can see the transactions in real time, and the data is there to be measured. But what does the current financial system cost in energy? Like, no one really bothers to do that figure. What does it cost to mine gold out of the ground that does nothing but look pretty? They put it on satellites, and it's a store of value if you want to go into gold. So it's kind of like crypto at the moment, because it's so new and it's not just an emerging asset, it's emerging technology. It's very easy to poke a stick at. Oh, there's lots of scams and money laundering, like as if the US dollar has never been used for money laundering or scams, So, the energy debate, I think, is very, very interesting, but it's kind of like, it's another one of those sticks to poke at it. A good friend of mine who's specifically on the mining side, on the proof of work side, he runs Easy Crypto Hunter here in the UK. He's the largest crypto miner supplier in the UK. It's obviously a great offering for businesses who want to get into it, because it's essentially just a computer, so we can write it off on that, all that kind of good stuff. But his biggest customers right now are energy providers that are providing green energy, which just gets wasted in the grid. So people that go and put up, £1 million worth of wind power, and they're getting paid like 3, maybe 7 cents per kilowatt hour, and the energy they're pumping into the grid, about 80% of it gets wasted because the battery tech is not up to spec, because where these wind farms are placed down, the infrastructure is not up to spec. So these guys are starting to look at crypto and mining and providing backbone infrastructure to these large blockchain networks as well. I'm providing green energy, I may as well use it for something and get paid. So I think the energy debate is a really good, healthy one, because the data is there in real time, which the data is not there in real time in other markets and networks, which I think is super interesting. As a data nerd as well, I find it super interesting.
I mean, we haven't even, this is fantastic stuff. I'm really enjoying what we're sort of talking about here. I mean, we haven't even got to like the T-Rex in the pen, which is Bitcoin yet, really, have we, Jeff? I mean, we're, even if we're looking at sort of the crypto market in general, I mean, when we put this, when we decided to do this event, I think the crypto market was worth something like, I think it was like about £1.3 trillion. It's now worth £1.7 trillion. And obviously Bitcoin is at the height of media attention. In your opinion, what's causing that? What is it? Just people getting more interested in it? Why are we seeing this boom now? Where this has been sort of around for the last 10 years. And another question I'm going to throw in there really is, I think there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace as to what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin started off as this a currency for people to use as a method of exchange that wasn't controlled by an institution. Yeah. Now we've got people calling it a store of value. You've got people in the US calling it a Chinese weapon that they can use to attack the US dollar. What is Bitcoin?
I think it's a really interesting question, and it's definitely one that's never going to be settled over a pint. And I think it's as boiled down as simple as this: Bitcoin can be a different thing for different crowds of people. From your cypherpunks, someone pointed out very early on, two people can transact without the use of a third party, such as the British pound or a central bank or whatever. I've myself have used crypto to move £5,000-6,000 back to Australia faster than Barclays, faster than any FX provider, for a fraction of a dollar, because I needed to get that money home faster than anyone else could provide it, because there was far too many middlemen, and just costs too much money. Like, why am I paying Barclays £90 to send $5 grand back to Australia? It just didn't make sense. So you've got the peer-to-peer part of it. Anyone can transact across wallets, which is great tech. Also promotes financial inclusion, for charity and donations. We're working with a bunch of charities right now that are looking to crypto because people are making gains. People generally want to give back, and people are more than happy to shave off a couple of basis points of their trades and give it to someone in crypto because they know it's not going to get soaked up through the middlemen, through costs and offices and all that kind of stuff. It's going to go direct to the charity from anywhere in the world. So it gives them a way to be, global in a local charity, which is great. The store of value thing, that can be down to, I think understanding monetary policy and how markets work. I think right now in the last kind of 18 months has been very unique in that, everyone's locked inside because of this global pandemic. We've got, I think the fragility of the global financial system has reared its head on, a delay of 7 days in food being delivered means absolute freaking panic for some reason. Like we thought everyone was more prepared than this.
And toilet paper.
And like when KFC swapped chicken providers and this provider like ran out of chicken on day one, like, okay, how do you get that wrong?
I didn't think I was going to make it at that point, Jeff, honestly.
Yeah, I thought it's getting off. So there's this worldwide kind of fragility of markets now. Like airlines can't fly anywhere. So now you've got all the supply lines around, airlines grounding all their aircraft. They ran out of space at airports because most of the planes are in the air most of the time. When they're all on the ground at the same time, no one thought that would happen, apart from the insurance companies, obviously. So you've got this unique bit where the velocity of money has changed, where money sits in markets has changed, where people are getting interest in yield has changed. And then, to try and make matters worse, governments are trying to, and certain monetary policies are trying to, patch up this shortcoming by just printing more fiat currency. There's been 20 or 25% of the total US supply was printed in 9 months of last year, which is crazy. And that's a policy that can be made behind closed doors, come out into the press, and then be in the financial markets within a week if the government process works like that. Compare that to something like Bitcoin. We know exactly when the next inflationary period is going to happen on Bitcoin. We know exactly when the next halving event happens. And if you want to go search Bitcoin halving, it's basically when you get rewarded for doing your work, it halves every 4 years. So instead of getting a salary increase, you get a salary decrease. And those kind of things are predicted and known versus completely unknown. And what we're seeing with a lot of institutional investors now that are sitting with, millions of, or if not hundreds of millions of US dollars on their balance sheet of like, well, this is definitely going to be worth 10, 15% less inside of the next 2 years. What do we do with $300 million, $500 million or more sitting on our balance sheet? Can't put it into equities because, who knows what the market's going to do right now? It's far too high. Bond yields are all over the shop, and we've got a global pandemic. Actually, this Bitcoin thing is worth a look because we can predict what it's going to be. There's a future price discovery. It is more liquid than gold. And we can, self-custody this anywhere in the world. So it promotes a store of value because there's more known things about it than unknown. They can look at the value of all wallets in real time. They can look at the hash rate of all the miners contributing to the network. They can look at, where coins are moving on and off chain, in and out of exchanges, and they can liquidate tomorrow if they wanted to. They don't have to go to a vault, pull it out, secure it, worry about getting robbed, and then take it to a gold bullion dealer. They can do all of this kind of stuff themselves. So being able to, secure part of their balance sheet into something as known as Bitcoin, a lot of companies have done very, very well over it. Everyone thought Michael Saylor was absolutely, absolutely crazy when he was still buying at 40K. We're up in the 50s and 60s still.
I mean, as always with everything, jump in. Yeah, sorry. As always, everything it's about trust. It's about confidence, and I think that you compare the rise in Bitcoin price back in 2017, 2018. At that time, it was very speculative still.
Yeah.
And whereas now the rise is based on institutions coming in, as Jeff pointed out, basically. You know, the Michael Saylor started it off, and then, you know, the Teslas and the Squares of this world all coming in. And interestingly, you know, Michael Saylor did a big conference at the beginning of the year explaining to other CEOs what it was all about and why he'd bought in and stuff like that. And obviously, you know, it takes institutions, you know, 3 to 6 months to get their paperwork in order to be able to start getting exposure to Bitcoin. So, you know, that is still happening in the background, and obviously a lot of people aren't shouting about it on a tweet about what their position is, because they're sort of much more private about it. But I think that it's now moved from the fact that you've got the sort of, you know, the early, and again, you know, even I mean 1718 for the real Bitcoin believers, that was very late in the market anyway, but it's still early. And now you've got the institutions that can't afford to be seen to be having no exposure to an asset that seems to be so has so much confidence.
It's not for the faint-hearted either, is it? I mean, looking just over the weekend, you know, where are we now? It's a sort of 12% dip. You know, the blackouts in China, the hash rate drop, the sort of the correction that's been experienced. You know, anyone looking at that might think, you know, is my money safe there? You know, what's you know, these are sort of high risk, high speculative assets, and sort of, you know, looking at them sort of going forwards, I think. You know, there's sort of talk of this black swan event. Like, if we look at blockchain, if we look at cryptocurrencies, if we're sort of going towards that, you know, where are we headed in the future? If I've got my facts correct, is it the sort of the Fermi paradox? It's sort of the stages that something needs to get through to sort of, Will's looking at me scared. That either means I've got it wrong or something's
No, I like it. It sounds exciting. I don't
it's
know what that
the
is. Pray tell.
So it's effectively the sort of the stages that a technology or something needs to go through in order to survive. So say with blockchain or say with cryptocurrency, you know, you've got network adoption, you've got liquidity, you've got all these stages that it effectively needs to go through. Now, at some stage, presumably there might be one of those stages, like I don't know, the government intervention. We've sort of touched on that a couple of times, you know, how these cryptocurrencies aren't institutional. How much of that is a threat to cryptocurrencies?
It's I'll take a little stab at it first. I would say it's chain dependent. Firstly, something as big as Bitcoin or Ethereum, it's gone too far now. There's kind of not really much they can do about it. They can regulate the endpoints and the businesses, such as exchanges like myself. For businesses that are building a new chain for whatever reason, they can try and, you know, regulate those kind of businesses. But in terms of, you know, we're going to ban Bitcoin. And in Europe, tried to ban Bitcoin about 5 times. And I know a bunch of guys that trade Bitcoin on an Indian exchange of all places. I don't know where it is or where it's hosted, but it's in India. It's not something they can stop. So I think gaining a greater understanding of what it is, and instead of how to police it as a threat, people are going to find a way to do it anyway. Whether the government kind of likes it or not, which is why there's still, you know, all types of different illicit activities that go on outside of crypto. So I think innovating towards it rather than running away from it is the best thing that regulators and governments can do right now. Getting an understanding on how to educate people instead of trying to ban it. The whole, I think what was the article was out yesterday or the day before about a UK Bitcoin or more central bank digital currency. So you don't need Bitcoin. It's like, well, it's going to be stable. It's not going to have any volatility. So I can't trade it. I can't make money. Because there are people that just want to invest in it and make money. There are people that want to have it as a long-term store of value, or people that want to use it as a payment network. That's kind of the beauty of it. But trying to outlaw it has never gone well for other activities in the past.
Absolutely. I mean, where are we? And by we, I mean the UK. Obviously, we've mentioned there. Yes, we've now got the central bank talking about Bitcoin. You know, Jeff, things like FCA regulation, anti-money laundering, the rest of the world. You know, what's your take on where we are as, you know, as a nation?
Definitely behind, I would say. We're definitely late to the game in 2018 in terms of awareness. We started in 2018 and we built our firm up as if we were like an FX prime broker. You know, we used some imaginary guidelines because that's where the skill set of one of our co-founders is, and built up with some existing frameworks around KYC, around compliance, which is why we have no problem working with UK banks. HSBC apparently have banned crypto transactions. We're still getting HSBC deposits and withdrawals every day. And because of the way that we do business, we haven't had those kind of pressures and problems. Where the banking are finding, I think this is where definitely behind. As soon as money goes offshore to an offshore exchange that has, GBP pairs like a Kraken or a Binance, even Coinbase now. Coinbase is not in the UK anymore. The UK banks have a problem with that because they're trying to keep the pound as sovereign as possible. Versus countries like Portugal, no tax on crypto specific games. So I know a few bag holders which are basing 2 of their businesses down there now. Places like Dubai or the Caymans, Singapore, even Australia have got very, very healthy regulations because they've looked at it objectively that it's an emerging tech, but it's also an emerging market. How do we best provide, security and anti-manipulation and fair policies to ensure the market grows in a positive way rather than in an illicit way? And the FCA have been very, very slow to act. They brought out guidelines for AML 5D around knowing your client and anti-money laundering in January of last year. We're one of the first firms to apply for that crypto asset license through several, talks and Q&As and policy requirements and etc. Got all the way till 19 days before the deadline in mid-December 2020, and they just said, well, anyone who applied is temporarily registered, which is not really the greatest PR that you put on a brand. Say we're temporarily registered, and someone that knows what that is, it doesn't make your brand look very good. But there's 90 very, very large businesses like Fidelity, eToro, Revolut, we're all on this list together, waiting for next steps. And they just don't have the manpower and the knowledge base behind them to accurately say, here's the line in the sand, step forward and claim your prize. They're very, very hesitant to let companies through dealing in an asset that they're uncomfortable with in the first place. We saw the same thing with the derivatives ban. That was completely widespread and completely unnecessary because there was like one crypto derivative provider in the UK for retail. Everything else has been CFDs, and it affected a lot of products that are actually really, really good. Getting Bitcoin and Ethereum exposure in your SIP pension via CoinShares and XBT, those are amazing products, and they were unleveraged. They were one-to-one, and they took all those off with a blatant ban that was not very well thought. And then you come to tax. The HMRC is still asking people politely to write down their gains in a spreadsheet and send it over. There's no incentive for people to record their gains accurately because it's treated as capital. You can't claim your losses, as far as I know, unless it's been changed. It's just a little bit of wacky tobacco, really. We need to step up as a country on the global stage when the US are pushing forward massively. Different countries in Europe are pushing forward massively, and Australia and parts of Asia have been doing it really well for 4 years plus. Really need to step up and make the UK post Brexit a haven for innovation in crypto instead of a bit of a fear state.
Here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
There's a bit of frustration in there. I'm really sorry, but we've worked really, really hard the last 12 months.
I mean, there's a reason why
I wish we could do more. I really wish we could do more. That's my opinion.
Extremely frustrating. So as a lawyer, I'm getting asked all the time and have to say like the delays are enormous. And so then looking at other jurisdictions, I've had to learn a lot about other jurisdictions, but I hate sending English clients to other, like having to look at listing and other. It's
Isle of Man, great tax regime. There's kind of a little bit of a layer there, but it's not that strong, and a director has to live there. I'm pretty sure I'm going to lose that dice roll, and I don't really want to move to the Isle of Man. I'm sure it's lovely, but I quite like London. You got Gibraltar, again, expensive. Someone has to live there. Estonia doesn't have the greatest brand image behind it right now, like 15K, and you can be a banking institution. Like, where's the gravitas and the protection there? And all it's doing is pushing the problem outside of UK borders, which is where a lot of people are getting scammed, losing their money, playing with leverage that people have never ever traded before. And because the barrier to entry is so low, someone with £1,000 can access to 100x leverage on a very illiquid token is just dangerous. So I'm really hoping in the next 12 months we get some really, really positive news, some positive direction, and they treat crypto and blockchain like a financial service instead of a technology it's used for money laundering and drugs. It's like less than 0.5% now because it's the worst money laundering tool that exists.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I mean, I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't just say you can use losses for
you
capital
can
gains
now.
tax.
Cool. So that's
You
outdated
can use
information.
What do
losses
you know
tax.
about it, Ben?
Yeah. But what would I know as a tax advisor?
Yeah.
But
But
I'm
still, I mean,
conscious.
being treated as a capital gain, that's still going to be like, well, okay, where do I trade up to? What do I not do? If it was treated something like Forex or spread betting, you would see a lot more, I think, healthy appreciation for people coming into it versus like, oh, I don't want to make too much money, I'm not going to tell anyone about it. So it's still like a dark secret to own crypto or trade crypto in this country.
Yeah, I mean, it very interestingly, hits on the HMRC website tend to go up every time sort of Bitcoin hits a peak. So evidently there are people out there doing these things. That's something like, oh, what are the tax consequences? And always make sure you've got good advice on that, because you don't want to have to go back 4 years and have to disclose everything you've been doing to HMRC in that time. And when you do, you need to get it right, but get it right going forwards and make sure everyone's up to date, really. I'm very conscious of time. And it's a shame because I could carry on doing this for far longer than our viewers' patience may. Their cups of coffee are cold, and absolutely. So there are a few questions that have been raised. So if it's okay with everyone, I'd like to spend the next sort of 5-10 minutes just quickly going over those for anyone who is happy to bear with us. A quick question, which was quite early on. Will, what are you buying when you buy an NFT?
Oof. So the true answer is not very much. You're buying a link to a file stored somewhere else. So it's a really good thing to look into, is exactly that question. So whatever platform you're buying through, whoever you're buying it from, really find out. But yeah, what it is that you're buying. So there is no consensus on that. But the token that you buy is a hashed link, so a link to a file. That's all. That's all the token is. And that file can be stored anywhere. Often it's on a thing called the Interplanetary File Storage System, which is a distributed database, distributed way of storing files. The problem is that if a file there gets overwritten, and if you or deleted, if you Google NFT pulling the rug, you will see that an artist sold a load of NFTs and then changed the underlying files to pictures of rugs rather than art. So that person then would get their NFT and click on the link and get, actually it was a picture of a rug, not what they thought they bought. So it's a very, there are a lot of problems with the space at the moment. I work with some of the marketplaces as clients, and also as I have clients who are looking to launch their own NFTs. And I've actually even put together a whole, if you're really interested in this, Fred, we can talk about it. I've got a whole risk mitigation issue document that I've put together about all the different problems. And to finish up, the main problems around the fact that the technology wasn't really designed to do this. So it's not an efficient way of doing it at the moment. And Ethereum is the largest public chain where people create these things. There are a lot of issues around things called gas fees, which is paying to use the network. And the way that works is, if you think of like a train and you're buying a ticket to ride on that train, the price of that ticket will alter depending on how many other people are in the carriage. And if there are a lot of people in the carriage, it'll be more expensive. Same with buying a plane ticket. If you're one of the last people to get on, it's more expensive. That can affect your ability to mint. You have to pay more basically to create these things. So there's a whole ton of issues. But again, I wouldn't get into it either as a purchaser or an issuer of NFTs without taking independent advice. It doesn't have to be me, but very least do some reading around the subject, and just Google like issues with NFTs, legal issues with NFTs, and do some reading. Again, we've got a document we've put together of about 15 or so articles that are a good intro that I'm happy to send anyone that wants it, for free, of course, just to do some background reading, because yeah, it's still a bit of a wild west out there.
It's kind of the tippy top of the Wild West at the moment as well. I mean, it started with the NBA shots, which is more about trading cards. I think the trading card thing is where it started, and now it's kind of what else is possible. Where it becomes more interesting, I think, when we get there, is when it starts creating liquidity around illiquid markets like property or a business or a local business. Like, imagine if you could buy a fractional ownership in your local coffee shop instead of going to your Starbucks. Like, well, I own a piece of that because there's a local market for local businesses. So that's the glass half full bit. It's just where we haven't even made the right size glass yet.
Yeah, and that's hugely exciting. So the European Commission is actually doing a consultation on regulation. They've come out with this thing called an ART, an asset-related token, which captures exactly that. Because at the moment, there's nothing in our legislation that talks about that. And again, there's no, so what you talked about, fractionalization of an NFT, Again, not legal advice, but that generally tends to be viewed as a security by regulators, certainly in the US and the UK. If it's just a collectible, you're generally okay. But if you're looking to issue fractionalized access to something, then you're into more regulated territory, but not legal advice.
Fab, thanks guys. Last question before we wrap things up. We sort of touched on this briefly, but it's a question from Matt saying some UK banks are banning customers who accept crypto. Thoughts on this in terms of its effect on the UK space, especially if more banks adopt the same position?
That was about specific business customers, wasn't it? Yeah, I saw that one this morning or yesterday afternoon. Yeah, it's a shame. I think they shoot themselves in the foot. It's going to push people away from NatWest and HSBC, etc. It just comes down to counterterrorism financing and anti-money laundering. And I think the biggest problem right now is not just, it's a shame they targeted just business owners because it's kind of a payments rail thing, but there's a lot of people that are like maliciously being like a money meal, essentially, under business accounts, under personal accounts, on whatever, and using UK exchanges. We get quite a lot of them as well, that will deposit money in, buy some Bitcoin, send it to an address. But unfortunately, those addresses are already on watch lists, so they get stopped before they even get kind of sent out. And the banks just trying to cover their ass, trying to keep as many businesses on the fiat rails as possible, and not be able to take payments from outside of the country what they don't know about. Imagine if you're a Bitcoin miner or an Ethereum miner and you're acquiring tokens out of nowhere and then selling them into a fiat system. There's a huge amount of loss of control there for UK banks.
Yeah, and I think, and having spent 6 months last year trying to get a bank account as a legitimate business, and being in the crypto space, and ended up having to go to Liechtenstein to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would talk to many banks and many crypto companies trying to do it, and I think that the base layer challenge for banks to sort of to understand why they're so anti-crypto is that it's so fast changing that in order to they'd have to have a huge department for compliance to do it. And the amount of money that actually are being exchanged on cryptocurrencies versus everything else is so small for them that it's easier to say no than yes. And that is the challenge that we have. And there are a few innovative banks that are prepared to put in the work and the manpower to keep on top of everything.
You have to pay for it.
You have to pay, you have to pay for it through the nose, absolutely. Yeah. But again, that's the phase that we're in at the moment.
Yeah.
And so anyone banning it at the moment doesn't mean that it's going to be banned forever. It's just going to be banned for a period, and then they realize they have to jump back on because there's a big enough market for them to afford to do it, basically. So that is, that's my personal experience of it as well, basically. And I think that it's just a period. The fact that they're banning it doesn't mean say it's bad. It doesn't mean they can't cope with it, basically. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Well, we'll probably wrap up there. I think we've moved out of coffee territory and it's definitely nearly lunchtime. So thank you all for all of your time this morning, for all of your wisdom. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you all. I'm sure we'll send out a link to everyone if they would love to watch this again. I'm sure they would. But otherwise, I'm sure we can all be sort of accessed via LinkedIn and various if anyone has any sort of specific questions for us. So from all of us on our Conversations with Coffee today, thank you for those that tuned in.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to you, Ben. And as someone who has worked with a lot of accountants in my day, to have someone who actually understands crypto and properly understands it and blockchain is amazing. You are one of a very, very, very small group of people. So yeah, I obviously will continue to send people your way that need your level of advice. But yeah, I appreciate you.
That's very kind.
And, yeah, thanks again.
You've made me blush on my own webinar. Thank you. Thank you all. Cheers. Take care.
Cool. Thanks everyone. Bye bye.